What's up, snappers, and welcome back to the channel. DDDREWSKY here. Today we're gonna be looking at the brand new card, Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, to see if he's worth your precious resources. We're gonna be looking at his key Synergies Counters and some decks that I brewed for him. But wait, before we do that, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. I do weekly reviews of the brand new card in Marvel Snap, so if you don't want to miss out, hit that notification bell right now. Now let's get back into it. Avengers Assemble! So now the question is, who is Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross? Let's take a look. So Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is a 2-cost, 2-powered card with the ability of when your opponent ends a turn with unspent energy, draw a card with 10 or more power. I believe he's a great enabler for big power slam card decks. He works well with cards like Surtur, Hulk, She-Hulk, anything that's basically 10 power. You have the ability to draw that card when you have a really bad draw, so he's definitely an enabler if you need that power in your deck. So I believe he does have potential, but let's break it down to see if he's worth your precious resources. All right, now let's take a look at some of the pros and cons about Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. Let's take a look. So the first pro that I want to talk about is that he's a low cost passive ability. Him being a 2-cost is pretty good on curve, right? You definitely want to play him out early and get his ability off, or the potential to get his ability off. And it's a ability that you don't really have to think about, right? It really depends on if your opponent plays any cards. But yeah, it's very passive ability. So another good point about him is that draw can be strong. We know that cards like Thanos or other cards that enable draw is pretty good in Marvel Snap. So draw is very important and it could be very crucial or even game winning in Marvel Snap. Another good point about him is that limited draw RNG factor. What I mean is what you're getting from the ability, if you can pull it off, you know it's a guaranteed 10 plus power. So it's better than just getting a random draw from your deck. It eliminates that RNG factor of getting a certain card from your deck, and you kind of know from either from a tracker that you're running or you know what in your mind is of your deck, then you could kind of figure out potentially what kind of power you're going to be getting from him. So another good point about him is that it's a possible 4 to 5 turns to get his ability off. Him being a 2-cost card is good, especially if you're waiting to see if your opponent wastes energy. Hopefully they do, and then you get your ability off. But 4 to 5 turns, I think it's pretty good, especially if you extend the game with magic. He definitely can get his ability to go off, hopefully if they're not running a certain type of deck. So now let's talk about the cons about Ross. Low power for 2-cost. 2/2 is very, very low in Marvel Snap. So if you don't get his ability off, it's going to be pretty brutal. Another con about him is that it's dependent on the opponent play. You don't really have any agency. Look at Bruce Banner, for example. I know it's a little bit different, but really depends on if your opponent is playing their cards efficiently or not. But yeah, if they are playing all their cards on the right curve, then you're kind of straight out of luck. So Wiccan decks are very popular in Marvel Snap, at least in my pocket meta. But yeah, I see Wiccan decks quite often, and if you are facing a Wiccan deck, it could definitely ruin this ability. If they're playing their cards efficiently or they're playing on curve, then Thaddeus Ross, especially if you don't get that ability off, is really, really rough. Another bad point about him is that he's a very easy card to counter. He's only 2-powered cards, so there are cards that I will mention that can counter him pretty easily. All right, now let's take a look at some of the key synergies and counters for Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. Let's take a look. So the first synergy that I want to talk about is Scar. Of course, Scar loves big powered cards, especially Ross potentially drawing a 10 power card for you. The synergy between that 10 power card and Scar is going to be immense. So Iceman is another synergy for Ross, especially if you slow down your opponents. If they can't play their cards efficiently, then you can slow them down, and then hopefully it can potentially ruin their curve and Ross can go off. Armor is another great synergy for Ross because, of course, you're going to be having a lot of big powered cards. You definitely want to protect those cards. So it can protect your cards from Shang-Chi or other counters that can destroy your 10 powered cards. So now let's talk about the counters. Red Guardian, of course, is a counter for him. Like I mentioned, only 2 power for Ross. So that's definitely an easy counter for Red Guardian. Lady Deathstrike, since Ross is only a 2-powered card, she loves cards that are under 3 power, so be careful of Lady Deathstrike. Wiccan, just like I mentioned, if they're playing a Wiccan deck, it's going to be straight out of luck usually for you. If they're playing on curve, if they're playing their energy right, then you definitely have to be worried about Wiccan decks. All right, now let's take a look at some of the decks that I brewed. I think they're pretty fun and competitive. Let's take a look. So the first deck that I have is called Thunderbolt Slam. This is my iteration of the Surtur Scar Slam deck. The objective of this deck is to basically power slam your opponent, make sure you protect your cards, and just win the game with straight raw power. So what you want to do on turn 1, you can run Squirrel Girl or Zabu. Zabu will discount your 4-cost cards. There's a lot of 4-cost cards in this deck. Squirrel Girl enables cards like Coal Obsidian. She's primarily used for him. Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, you could definitely play him on turn 2. You definitely want to run him on curve as soon as possible, and to potentially, hopefully, that your opponent is not playing enough, cards on curve, and then his ability will go off. Armor and Cosmo are tech options here just to protect all your big cards. Cosmo against Shang-Chi, Armor again against Shang-Chi or other cards that can destroy your cards. Surtur on turn 3, definitely want to play him out on curve. He is great just to start setting up that lane, just to start generating that power with all the big power cards here. Ares is definitely a staple in this list, especially with all the big power cards you have here. More than likely, you'll be able to get his ability to go off. Atuma, ideally, you definitely want to play in the armor lane. You definitely don't want to run him in an empty lane. If you have to, then you kind of have to, but more than likely, you definitely want to pair Atuma with armor. Crossbones, you can definitely play him. Really depends if you're winning a certain type of lane, but he's definitely a great viable option here as a 10 power card. Coal Obsidian, you want to combine with Squirrel Girl. In any of those lanes, you could flexibly play Cole in any of those lanes. Arrow is an awesome tech card here, especially being a 10 power card. If you want to throw off your opponent, move their last card, and potentially win that lane. Scar just loves all these 10 power cards, so more big power cards on the board. Scar's going to have immense value here. All right, now let's take a look at my second list. Well, this list is called ThunderAriStones. This is my iteration of a Thanos Arishem with a lot of big power cards. The goal of this deck is to basically play out as much cards as possible, slam as much power as possible, and even counter your opponent. So for turn 1, you probably want to play any of the stones that you get from Thanos. For turn 2, Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, Armor are great options just to be playing on curve. You definitely want to set them up early. Armor is to protect all the big cards here, and then Ross is just for getting a draw from your list. Kyria is here to protect the big cards like Scar or Thanos or any of the stones. Surtur, of course, gets a lot of value with all the 10 power cards here. Shang-Chi is a great tech option, especially with all this power that's going down in the meta. Crossbones, Coal Obsidian, and Arrow are awesome options at 10 power. You can definitely play them in this type of list. They have a lot of synergy with the stones or any of the cards that are here like Surtur or Scar. Mockingbird gets tons of value here, especially with all the cards that are from Arishem or Thanos or even the stones. So more than likely you can get Mockingbird super cheap. I know she's 9 powered, but she's a great value in a Thanos list. Scar gets all this value from all the big power cards here. And then Thanos and Arishem are just their own archetype. They are here primarily just for the cards that they generate. All right, now let's take a look at my third and final list. So this list is called the Thunder Knight. This is my take on the Black Knight mixed in with Hela, discarding cards, and then getting some draw from Thunderbolt Ross. So ideally what you want to do is basically discard as much as possible. It really depends on if you want to get the Black Knight Blade big, or you just discard as much as possible and then bring them back with Hela. So for turn 1, Black Knight or Blade are awesome options to be played on curve. Black Knight, you probably want to set up, discard a card in the next turn just to get that power going for the Blade. Blade, it really depends on your hand. If you see a big card in your hand, then you could probably run Blade turn 1. Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is a option on turn 2, especially setting him up and then potentially drawing one of the big cards in your hand. Lady Sif, it really depends on your hand. You definitely can use her just to discard cards other than pretty much Hela. Ares, War Machine, Black Cat, Coal Obsidian, those are just big slam power options. War Machine is really here for Infinite. War Machine is probably okay to not discard, or it really depends if you're okay discarding him, but he's really here just for the Infinite. Arrow is just a great value pick at turn 5 with the 10 power. You'd either play her or just discard her and then bring her back with Hela. Just like I mentioned, Hela is an awesome finisher at turn 6. You could definitely run Hela. It really depends on how much you've discarded, and then you can bring them all back with Hela. And even on the last turn, you can run the Infinite. It really depends if you have the War Machine on board. And then Death is just value at 12 power, discard her, and then bring her back with Hela. All right, now let's take a look at the spotlights that are featured with Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. Let's take a look. So Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is paired up with Blink and Nebula. Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is a Series 5 card, Blink is a Series 5 card, and Nebula is Series 4. So I believe Blink is a great addition to any collection. She is great if you love energy cheating or bringing out cards from your deck. She's a very fun card, and I believe she's actually very good. Nebula is a staple as a 1-cost card. She has a lot of value. She's definitely one of the best 1-cost cards. If you don't have her, definitely go get her. So for the spotlight variants, Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, I love the art style. I feel like he's very imposing, very strong. I like the pose that he's doing. Blink, I like the art style. I think she looks really cool. Definitely is a representation of her. If you didn't get her season pass variant, I think this is a great option. Nebula, I love this variant. I definitely would want this in my collection. I think this is a classic looking Nebula. You don't have a Nebula variant, definitely go get this one. And remember guys, to make sure you have 4 keys before opening in a week. You definitely don't want to regret missing out on a brand new card or a variant that you want. So make sure you have 4 keys before opening. All right, now let's take a look at my star ratings for Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. Let's take a look. So for competitive, I gave him a 3 stars. I believe he'll be good, but it really depends on your opponent, right? If they're playing their cards efficiently, then he's kind of a dud, and he's very counterable. So I would say 3 stars is fair for him. For fun, I gave him a 2.5 stars. I know getting a card from your deck sure is kind of fun, but more or less the interaction is not that fun personally for me. And I don't know about you, but yeah, I think draw is okay, but I don't know how fun that really is for a lot of people. Flexibility, 3.5 stars. You saw the decks that I brewed for him. I think he can go in a lot of different decks. Technically, his ability is flexible, but it really depends on how you build your deck, right? You need to surround your deck with 10 power cards. Doesn't have to be a lot of them, but you know, he has flexibility right there. So for future changes, I give him a 2.5 stars. It really depends on how well he does in the meta. If a lot of people are not being able to draw a card from him, then I could definitely see second dinner, maybe buffing him, maybe reworking him even. But yeah, maybe even a power boost, because like that 2 power is pretty low. So more than likely, I would say 2.5 stars. But again, just like I mentioned in the previous videos, they haven't been really buffing or nerfing a lot of the new cards. So I'm kind of reserved on my rating there. All right, now let's see if Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is worth a snap or skip. Let's take a look. So I say skip on Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. I know it's a little bit controversial, but I believe it really depends on what you're playing against, right? I could see the potential of getting a 10 power card from him. I totally see that. But again, it really depends on what your opponent is playing. But again, if you have resources to get this card, totally go get it. But I would say for the general public or, you know, casual snappers, I think he's definitely passable. He's not really needed or a must-have. So I would say definitely skip on him. So let me know your thoughts on Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. Am I completely wrong? Did I miss any synergies? Did I miss any counters or some decks that he could be featured in? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. I would love for you to be a part of this amazing community. And I'll see you guys on the next Snapper Skip. Happy snapping.